Hello and welcome to a new episode of New Earth Awakening. And today we welcome back to the show Tom T. Moore. Hi.
Hi, how are you doing? And hello to everybody all over the world that's watching this podcast. Uh, it's it's amazing how the world is growing even smaller because of this ability for us to talk to each other.
Exactly. And it keeps on increasing this connectivity between all of us human beings so that we may remember that we all are one.
We are all here for a perfect reason. Yes.
Exactly. So let's start by just tapping into this oneness that we have not only between us human beings, but also with our extraterrestrial friends. And so as we're preparing for first contact, Tom, share with us whatever it is that you know about that topic.
Okay. I was told all the way, way, way back that, and this book came out in 2013. And towards the end of the book, I was getting ready to close the book off, and finally one day, um, Antura, now that's the ET that I'm talking to. He's a member of my soul group or cluster, as it's called. In other words, we're fragments of the same soul. No one on Earth is a whole soul having lives. We're all fragments of the soul. So he's a member of my soul cluster. And after 800 lives on Earth with an interest in exploration and designing villages and towns from their very inception, he's having a life as an amphibian from the planet Nomo in the Sirius B star system that is a water world. And he's having a life as part of a first contact team of 4 people, and they're on board a mothership, and that's hovering 50 miles above the United States. And the whole world has been split up into sections so that there's about 25 of these motherships that are taking millions of readings per day as part of what's called the Earth experiment. The Earth experiment was created by Creator, and I call him Creator for 2 reasons. One, the word Creator is accepted by all the major religions of the world. So no matter what you call a Creator in your own religious beliefs, it's all one being. And the other is that I was told that Creator has created trillions of galaxies in this universe, every single one of them different from all the others. So I found that so amazing that the word creator just seemed to do better than God or whatever you might wish to term the supreme being. So that's sort of just the intro, so to speak. That when I was getting ready to close off the book, Antura finally told me one day, he said, "Oh, uh, you're uh, you're going to meet me someday." And I was really surprised about that. And it turns out that we are supposed to meet, but it has not happened yet. And this will be sort of the first contact, you might call it. And that's where that's going to go from there.
So when can we expect the first contact to happen and how could it
Yeah.
look like?
Yeah, and you have to understand, there are people that have been studying this for ages and ages. You talk about people like Ross Coulthart and George Knapp and gosh, I'm forgetting everybody, but there have been people that have been studying this for years and years. I sort of just got dropped into it not knowing very much other than I had a great interest in science fiction and so on. But this contact is coming and it's getting really, really close. There's even Steven Spielberg is coming out with a movie on June 12th, I think, around that period of time called Disclosure Day. And I asked about that in one of my meditations a couple of weeks ago, and I was told I was asking my interior. I said, "Well, is this going to be like a horror movie?" Because you look at the trailer, and I encourage people to look at the trailer. And I was told, "No, it's going to be more of a thriller in order to interest people." But I've also heard and watched an interview where I was told that Steven Spielberg, after one of his movies, Close Encounters or whatever, was approached by two Navy officers and said, "Would you like to know more?" And so he's gotten a lot of information from, it sounds like, the Navy, government, whatever. You have to understand, sometimes these guys can do what's called in other words, can put you off in a different direction than they would want you to than you would want to be on to in order to for you not to discover things about what they've been doing, which may include, and I'm trying to get into this. In fact, on my very next meditative session tomorrow morning, I'm going to try and demand, and I don't know if I'm going to get an answer or not, that there's actually been someone that was not listed as part of the normal NASA space program that died on the moon. How did he get there? And and supposedly we do have anti-gravity ships that can at least go above the Earth's atmosphere. Well, if they can do that, can they go to the moon? Probably. So these are all things that are slowly being rolled out because these secrets have been kept for 70 or more years.
Exactly. We could go into those, like those events, like Roswell or something, right? That seems to have been the beginning of this movement of compartmentalizing information and
Yeah.
hiding it away.
And it even went back farther. 1897, there was a scout ship that crashed here in Texas. Sorry, I'm forgetting the name of the town. And they buried the pilot in a graveyard. But the gravestone was stolen, so they don't know exactly where it is. But they have done searches because it hit a windmill, and they found some little pieces of it. So that was 1897. So this has been going on a long time. The reason these ships have been crashing, one of the major reasons, is that on the Earth experiment, Creator created the space-time continuum, as it's called, in 4 negative energies, where our universe and the trillions of other universes are created in the 10 positive energies. But our Creator wanted to see if the 4 negative energies could be worked with. And so that's why we all volunteered, our souls volunteered for the Earth experiment. And at the same time, all these ET ships are supposed to be taking these millions of readings every day as part of it. The problem is some of these ships can't handle these 4 negative energies, and they've crashed. And there's been a couple of huge ones. One that may be in South Korea that they had to build a building around. It was so huge. And then there's another one on a Skinwalker Ranch. There we go. And it's buried underneath what appears to be like a mesa, but probably it was buried there because it was too huge to move. And there's even a portal above the ranch and another portal that I just asked about recently that's on the ground. And I asked, well, why is that portal there? And it was created for them to have access, them meaning the ETs, to have access to that huge ship that crashed on the Skinwalker Ranch. So there's all sorts of this stuff that's been going on. And of course, there's whole teams of people that go out and retrieve these ships and take them back to the United States and Brazil and Russia and China and all, and they're all reverse engineering these craft to get to the anti-gravity, but they don't want to give it to us. We should be already traveling in passenger planes that are anti-grav and not fueled by jet fuel.
Yeah, well, that leads us already into this topic of energy, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about energy, you know?
Yeah. Okay. What do you want to talk about?
Well, basically, it's like in universities, people get teach that there is a lot of lack mentality, like there are not enough resources for everyone, including energy. And so we need to distribute it in a certain way, etc. Well, first of all, the universe is not limited at all, ever, right? So energy is also not limited. But there needs to be a certain way in which we can tap into this endless source of quantum energy, right?
Right.
Which we haven't done yet.
And
So let's speak about that.
well, we have, but they haven't released it. There's a
Yes,
there's a free energy machine. Now keep in mind there were other free energy machines, but what happened? The oil companies would give these people $1 or $2 million and buy the machine and then hide it, you know, never to be seen because it would cost them billions of dollars in oil profits. So there has been one that I've been told for the last 3 years is coming, and the only problem has been it's been held up by people in this organization because this supposedly is like a large think tank or something like that that developed it, has the plans, and they're supposed to release it without a patent so anybody can make one of these in their garage. But they've been holding off releasing it because they know it's going to change everything. Instead of our cars running on gas and oil, I'm told within 10 years, everything will be electric, that they will be running on these little free energy machines that will, like if you have an electric car right now or a hybrid, that this will take the place of that battery and you'll have one in your car, you'll have one to power all the electric power in your home, and it's just getting these guys that have been sitting on their derrieres, um, to release these plans and let it go and find its own level. But it'll also change the whole earth because even people in a little village in Africa that has had no electricity for hundreds of years, thousands, whatever, they'll be able to have electricity. They'll be able to have computers. They'll be able to learn, educate themselves. And you're going to see, I'm told, in the future, Africa become a major power in production and things, thanks to free energy. So these are all things ahead of us. We just have to keep leaning on these guys. Come on, get your act together and let's get going.
exactly. That's exactly the point. For example, have you ever asked questions about Tesla and what he was doing and how close he was to unlimited energy for everybody transmitted just through air, basically, or things like that, other inventors?
I don't think I know enough about that to comment. I have asked some questions. People can go to my website and to the articles and news sessions section and check. Just type in Tesla or Musk and see what I have on it. I don't think I've gotten sufficient answers to know for sure whether he actually has that information or not.
Cool. Thank you. So let's dive a little bit back into science fiction because you said you were totally interested in this topic, like forever watching movies. I guess you are also in the movie business. And I also love science fiction all of my life, and I see it as movies being sometimes kind of disclosure already, preparing our brains for that not to be so mega ultra out
Sure.
there.
Like Close Encounters, because the question is, did at the end of that movie, and I hope I'm not spoiling it anyone that hasn't seen the movie yet, but at the end of the movie, somewhere around 10 people get on that spaceship and they go off to another planet. Has that really happened? One wonders, and it could have. Some people claim there's a planet called Serpo or something like that, that has hosted people, and some maybe have come back and some didn't. So there are all these stories that are associated with these science fiction films. Now, naturally, films like Independence Day, where the aliens are attacking or whatever, I mean, that did huge business. So naturally, they're uh, they're going to circulate aliens are bad, and that's where this false flag possibility comes up, because we've been, one movie after another has been the aliens are attacking, they're going to eat us, or they're sticking their tongue down our throats, or on and on and on and on. And eh, you know, these people are, all the ones that are involved in the Earth experiment are here to take readings. Uh, they're nice people. They're at peace, and they protect us to make sure that Earth is never taken over by anybody. If you hear somebody saying, "Oh, yeah, the aliens are going to," that is not going to happen. We are protected, and I mean with serious weapons if they have um, to keep everything fine, because there really was a space war. There really was a Star Wars, but it took place several 100,000 years ago, and billions of people died. It was a war that took place over 27,000 universal years, but 270,000 Earth years. And so, they were really nasty back in that time. They they didn't just blow up a planet like you saw in Star Wars, with the big planet-wide thing. They would come in and blow up the sun, and that would destroy all the planets orbiting that sun and kill billions of people. And that happened over and over again, by both sides, because the Draco reptilians did that, and so did what we now call the Federation of Planets in our part of the galaxy. They would do the same thing. So it was a really, really nasty war that went on for years and years and years.
Yeah, you're talking about the Lyran Wars, aren't you?
Talking about the what?
Lyra, for example.
Well,
Lyra was
okay,
also part of
I'm
that.
told diplomatically it's called the Great War, because the Dracos reptilians came to our galaxy because they had run out of planets to conquer in their galaxy, and they started taking over planets in our quadrant of the galaxy, and that's how the war started. Maybe there was another war even way before that, but the war that I'm told was, in my book, I call it the Reptilian War, but later I was told, hey, now diplomatically it's called the Great War.
Ah, okay. Good. But Lyra was not part of that one?
Never, no, that's an ancient world, I believe.
Well, that's where I first individuated, and I remember this war with the Draco reptilians, I was saving people around, or trying
Okay,
to, as
and
many as possible.
it may be, maybe there was a planet called Lyra in the war. I don't know. I mean, when you talk about it in my book, I was first told that the Federation of Planets had 200 planets that had joined together after the war. But I was told later, much later, that was given that so as not to make the people that read my books and newsletters fearful. And I said, well, I wouldn't have been fearful, because they eventually told me it was 20,000 planets. And I said, I wouldn't have been fearful. And they said, but the people reading your books and newsletters would have been. So they started, it's called spoon feeding. And in fact, the very meditative session I had last week, I was saying, Ventura, you need to get a bigger spoon and start feeding us, because you're not feeding, you're not feeding us enough. And the other thing was that their ship hovering above us, 50 miles above us, in a slightly different frequency so they don't scare us to death. That on the outside, it's 3 miles wide and 20 stories tall. In the book, I was told it was 1 mile wide and, maybe 11 stories or something like that. But their ship was the one that did the Phoenix Lights um, flyby in 1997. And so it's actually 3 miles wide, 20 stories tall with 11 decks. And on the inside, because it's in the positive, and this is really strange, even the ETs were surprised that when they go inside the ship, it's 15 miles wide in the 10 positive energies and has 11 decks. And two of the decks are so large, they're 12 to 12 and a half miles long, and they have very high ceilings so that the bird beings, among many others, can fly inside. They have lakes. Antura is an amphibian, so he swims in the lakes. They have this for the crew of 900 plus their families, totaling 1,600, because they lived their whole lives on board the ship, and so they have these play areas for them and their children.
Thank you. That's really cool, isn't it? When you think about it, you live on a ship, it's a whole ecosystem.
Right. And they're even much, much larger ships, but they're prevented from getting anywhere close to Earth because these ships are the size of planets. And just sort of like that star killer ship, in Star Wars, they're really huge, not necessarily in a round shape, they could be in another shape too. But there are ships that are much, much larger, but they are not allowed close to Earth.
Wow. Thank you. So let's dive a little bit more into this topic of ETs and consciousness. So your friend Antura, which is basically another expression of your own oversoul, or however other people
Yeah,
want to understand it.
yeah, yeah. People call them oversouls, but they're actually souls, and that's something that Jane, what's her name? Jane. Oh, gosh, I'll remember it. Hopefully, she had Oversoul 7 book, and the way she imagined it or got it was that there was an intermediate soul that took care. But in actuality, we have connections directly to our soul. Okay, there's nothing in between. So there's no oversoul 7, 8, or 9. It's just strictly our soul.
I
Okay.
love that. So tell us about Antura. How does it feel like? How does his energy feel like? What is his consciousness like?
Huh. Okay. When I'm in these meditative sessions, okay, and you have to understand, anybody can do what I do because everyone has the pineal gland in the back of your heads. It acts as an antenna for every type of telepathic thought, feeling, image, just anything that you can name. Even tarot readers receive their information and it goes down to their fingers so that they shuffle the cards so that they pull up the right cards for the people they read for. Pendulums, you name it. Okay. All of this stuff all comes in through the pineal gland. So in my case, I'm told that I receive what are called thought packets. Okay. So these thought packets come in through the pineal gland. They are processed by my brain according to my knowledge, my education, my religious or spiritual beliefs, all this. So 10 people could ask the same question and receive 10 different answers, all according to what you believe and what you have learned up to this point and so on. So obviously a guy that that is a quantum physicist would receive a whole different answer to his question than I would because I just have a degree in finance and they have to dumb down any scientific uh, uh, you know answers to me because I just couldn't pick it up. Okay, it's just the way it is.
Yeah. Yeah, those are the filters of the personality, right? That
Yeah.
they need to work with.
An accountant, okay, let's get it to you in numbers. So I encourage everybody. I mean, Creator has told me, hey, Tom, I'm here. I will instantly, if you're the people that, read your books and newsletters and see your podcasts and all this stuff, all they have to do is just put themselves into a light meditative state is something you can immediately wake up from it. It's not something that's called somnambulistic, I believe it's called. So you just put it into this light thing where you're not thinking about anything else. That's why I do my meditative sessions at typically around 1 or 2 a.m. starting in on Saturday mornings so that I have nothing else on my mind. And you just surround yourself with a bubble of white light and then you say, I wish to speak to Creator. And Creator will be immediately, instantly there. And Creator tells me over and over and over again that Creator will answer even the most trivial questions. All you have to do is ask for Creator, and you will immediately get to speak to Creator. And so I'm working on a book right now that's over 250 pages on questions for Creator, but I still have a long way to go. People keep sending me in, you know, 16 or 18 questions, and I keep asking all these questions um, that Creator gives me the answers on. You know, do it. It's Creator loves every one of us. So just remember there's great love. You just have to ask for Creator or your own guardian angel, who I call Theo, and so on.
Or your ET friend nearest to you, quasi, right
And,
now. Like you, Antura.
yeah, and I had a hard time getting his name. I'm bad with names in my meditations. And for a while, it was like Antu. Finally, one day, Antura said, Antura! He almost screamed in my ear. And so that's how I finally got his name. I'm just not too good on names and all. And when I did my book, Atlantis and Lemuria, I actually have the actual longitudes and latitudes of where each one of those continents existed. And when I was doing it, I had to say, okay, is the top of Atlantis, is it 44 degrees? No. 45? No. So I would have to work. Is 47 and a half? No. Lower that. And it really took me time. So what happens? I send all this information into my publisher. The editors couldn't figure it out, so they left it out of the book. Since then, I have put it in my newsletters and to give everyone the exact locations of where those two continents that destroyed themselves in wars, which was the reason Jesus came.
Thank you. Yes, exactly. Jesus. So let's just tune into Jesus now and his story and what you have found out so far
Right.
about his
And
life.
and I'm still working on it. I've talked to Jesus several times. When I first started talking to him, I didn't know if he wanted to go by his Jewish name from 2,000 years ago, which was Yeshua ben Yosef, I think. Okay. Uh, and he said, no, Tom, just use Jesus, how people, look at my or say my name in modern times. So that was the start of it. And so the reason, now keep in mind, the creator had already created this special space-time continuum. He had created 12 parallel Earths. There are 12 Earths, okay? The highest frequency Earth is non-physical, and all the lives that go on that Earth are considered the perfect lives, and all the other lives are compared to that one, which I don't think is fair, but that's the way they made the game, and that's the way we play it. So the creator wanted to see how these four negative energies could be worked with. So here we are. We have these 12 Earths. We have typically people are having each soul fragment is having somewhere between 600 and 800 lives on average on Earth. They all are going on at the exact same time, which is kind of hard. We think of them linearly, but they aren't. They're all going on at the same time. So the life you're having right now affects all your other lives that you're having. So keep that in mind. You got to try and be as good a person as you can to hopefully help your other lives. And so here, because all these lives were going on at the same time, Atlantis and Lemuria were destroying themselves. Creator put out a call across all the trillions of other creations for a soul to come and teach unconditional love. Okay. And so the soul of Jesus responded. They had a quick conversation. Now you have to understand conversations between creators and souls or souls and souls. They take place in a split second. They have, they get, and, what about, do you want to do this or you want to do that? Or this is what I want. And, oh, okay. All that is in a split second. So Jesus came to have to teach unconditional love. But first he had somewhere around 30, maybe not quite 30 lives on earth, just with a single soul fragment like we have, because he needed to see how it was to try and operate with just a single soul fragment. And so that's what he did. And he had somewhere a little less than 30 lives before the life he had in Nazareth. But the life that he had in Nazareth, he had 3 times the size of our soul fragments. So he could do healings. So I was told that if everybody had the same size soul fragment as Jesus had, we'd all have been able to do healings and everything, but there wouldn't have been an Earth experiment to try and solve all these problems that that had not been solved all across the universe. We took on everybody's problem that had not been solved to solve on Earth. And we also agreed to be veiled so that even though, like I've had 100,000 lives back on Nomo before I got here, but I was veiled from knowing about any of those past lives. So I couldn't rely on say, well, I remember 20 lives ago, I had this problem and this is the way we solved it. Can't do that. So that's why we were veiled from knowing, because Creator wants us to solve all these unsolvable problems. So that's how that came along. So here comes Jesus, and in his for his major life, and and so uh, uh, the things that were later left out, and I believe this started at the Council of Nicaea, which took place from 327 to 325 A.D. So we're talking about 300 years later. Now, just imagine today if we um, if we go back to 1726. Now, how much do we know about what was happening in 1726? You know, that's just something that, when there's 300 years, it's just very, very difficult to be able to remember what events happened and so on 300 years ago. And so you can sort of pardon them for one thing. Now, because this Council of Nicaea had 300 males, all uh, they were priests and bishops and cardinals, from my understanding. I'm going to be asking more questions about that, but that's what I understand. So 300 of them spent 2 years voting on what the Christian beliefs were. And so that's, I think, one of the things, because they wanted a male dominated society, one of the things they wanted to cut out was the fact here was Mary Magdalene and here was Jesus, and they actually married, and they had 4 children together, 3 boys and 1 girl. And he and Mary Magdalene were deeply in love. I asked people, would you deny, since Jesus was teaching unconditional love, would you deny him the human love of loving another person and spending their life with them? So um, that's where that came in, starting with the Nicaea and then on with the Council of Rome later and so on. She was just left out. And also, they decided to leave out, you know, where he got his education. And so this past week in my meditative sessions, I got into that, and he told me that shortly before he was 13 years old, and by the way, he was born in 4 BC. Now that's how bad the records were kept at that time period. He was actually born 4 years earlier than they have him born in the Bible, and he was born on August the 28th. Now his birthday is celebrated on December 25th because that's the end of a major pagan holiday, and they wanted to grab all these pagans and get them into the church and get money from them. And so they said, we'll celebrate Jesus' birthday on December the 25th. That's how that came on. He was actually born on August the 28th. So just before he's 13, he had saved up money from working as a carpenter with his father, and he was able to get on a cargo ship that went from wherever the port was near them to the port of Alexandria. Now, one of the things, follow-ups I'm going to be asking, and I've got it already on my list for this week, is I saw and I put this in my last newsletter, I put a map of the Alexandria port that a man put together in the late 1890s, but it was for 30 BC. And what was interesting, it had on the map, it said a Jewish quarter in Alexandria. And I thought that was kind of interesting. And I'm going to be asking if he went to the Jewish quarter first, because he eventually wound up with what was called the Brotherhood of Luxor, which is one of the mystery schools. I'm going to re-ask about that coming up, make sure I got that right. And so he spent 2 years there with the Brotherhood of Luxor, learning all about their mystery school. And I asked him, well, because recently, if for those of you that have been your viewers that have been keeping up with things, it seems that there's a huge energy complex underneath the pyramids that extends down a couple of kilometers or so. All right. And so I asked him, I said, did you spend any time in that energy complex underneath the pyramids? And he said, yes, I spent days there. So at the end of that 2-year period, he returned back home for a family reunion. And so at that point, I asked him, had you already met Mary Magdalene before you left, when you returned, or was it in India? Where did you actually meet? He said, no, I met her during the time of the family reunion. And so I said, well, did you marry then? No. He said, I worked and earned some more money, and I was able to get on a caravan going to India, and and I was able to help my passage by working with the camels or whatever they did on their trip to India. And so he went there for a little less than 2 years and studied in the mystery schools there or with the yogis. And then when he came back, that's when he married Mary Magdalene. And they had a big Jewish wedding, he said.
Thank you for that. So, have you found out more about Mary Magdalene and what mystery school she attended?
No. And wonder, and that's going to be sort of some of the questions I'm going to try and get into. Did she go to a mystery school? Was she in a school, semi-mystery school or whatever in the, the Middle East where she was? Because she didn't go to India. She didn't go to India until, and I don't know if I want to get into this because this gets really controversial, when the family had to flee. Herod threw them out of the country, and they went back to India for a year or two with their family. So anyway, let's jump over that for a little while.
Okay, we will leave it at that. That was already very amazing. I love this kind of information. I don't know. I love Yeshua, I called him Yeshua, I'm like, hey,
Yeah.
buddy, where are you?
Yeah, I know that. And he doesn't mind. I think he wanted me to go with Jesus because of the people that, watch my podcasts and read my newsletters. Many of them are Christians, and so he wants to address them as the way they have been taught in their churches.
Yeah, I guess it's also easier, to get a contact, you know, with people when you meet them where they are. And if they already know him by Jesus, it's just like, hey,
Yep, I think so.
cool. Thank you very much. So let's tap a little bit further into tapping into past lives. Because you also say that you remember basically a lot of your past lives. I don't know how many you remember. I forgot the number.
Well, I don't exactly remember them the way some people can tap into it. I start asking questions in these 900 or 1,000 of these meditative sessions that I've done so far, starting in 2005. And so I would ask about the past lives because we're also having what are called overlapping lives. Now, why are we having overlapping lives? Well, it's because there are billions of people on the earth right now, and there are only so many souls that volunteered for the earth experiment. So we're having multiple lives during time periods. As an example, in about 44 or 45 future lives, I'm going to have a life that's happening right now where I'm a woman that's working in the Pentagon. And in 2030, 31, whatever, I'm going to join the President of the United States, who I have already met in this life. That was my yoga teacher of all things before he went on another peace mission. I can't remember. So she's going to have me come in as one of her main advisors. So that's an overlapping life because I'm still alive in this life, but but uh, there she is working in the Pentagon. So there are many other lives. I uh, we had talked before about the fact that I've had to have heart ablations in this life. Now, the reason I started asking about that, what was I balancing? And I was told that I was a young German soldier in the trenches in World War One, and that my job was to kill my enemy, but at the same time, I brought grief and heartache to the families and friends of those that I killed. And so I asked Theo, I said, well, can I say a prayer for them? And he said, oh, yes. He said, and he was later to say that you have your 1,005 lives you've had on earth so far. This is the very first one that you've ever thought to say a prayer for the people that you've harmed in past lives. And he said, the way it works, you have to say this every single day because when you say that prayer on that day, it affects the very same days. Now, it may be like let's just for the life I had as a German soldier. I was probably only 18 years old or something. Okay. Um, but it would affect that life I was having at that time on that day when I was 18 years old. And the same thing if on another life where I was 45, I'm 45 years old, and it affect that particular day. So every day that you say this prayer, then it affects that particular day, and it lowers the balancing that you have to do, not only for past lives, but future lives. So it makes all of your future lives easier on earth by saying this prayer, which I'm going to repeat right now. Say, and by the way, you can go to my website, click on signs, and download the prayer. It goes, I ask any and all beings to come to the aid and comfort of anyone that I've ever harmed, either physically, mentally, morally, spiritually, or emotionally, in any past, present, or future life. And I ask that any and all beings come to the aid and comfort of the families and friends of anyone that I've ever harmed in any way, in any past, present, or future life. Thank you. Now you can find that sign. I will print it out, paste it on your bathroom mirror to say each morning. Eventually, you'll have it down. You won't have to look to read it at all. You'll be able to say it. But if you have to say this out loud. Now keep in mind, it's not thinking; it's saying out loud, and you will find even this life will start getting easier for you because you're balancing those past lives and even future lives. So it helps you now and forever.
Thank you for that.
Okay?
We will be posting your links so that people can download all this content easily. Keep it in mind. Description
Right.
box.
Okay. So it, I mean, I've had tons of other lives. My sole interest is obviously religions in this life, but also in other lives. I'm advisor to kings and queens and heads of state and small countries, big countries like the United States. So these are, uh, you know, the reason that came about was that supposedly I helped in the Star Wars by having the suggestion that we offer the Dracos that 10% of the souls having lives in the Earth experiment, they would consist of these reptilian souls. And the Federation of Planets refused to offer this to them. Eventually, they did 450 universal years later. They accepted it. So after that, they said, oh, you've got to be an advisor to the Federation because you think outside the box. And I said, no, I don't think outside the box. Oh, yes, you do. So all the people that were wanting to had their sole interest in being leaders of countries and everything, they all wanted me to be their advisor. So that's why instead of having just 600 or 800 lives, I'm supposed to have 1,300. So I have another 295 or so more to go. And they didn't want to tell me at first, but it doesn't affect me because, I'm just in this life. Who cares if I got 300 more lives, but they were really reluctant. I mean, I had to say, okay, guys, is it 100 more, 200, 500 more? Oh, no, it's not 500 time. It's 300. So that's the way they finally told me.
They also have their own gigs, as I say.
They're afraid I might be depressed. Like I said, I'm just doing the best I can in this one. Us don't worry about it, all those others. They can
Yeah.
take care of themselves.
Yeah, exactly. So before we close up for today, I wanted to ask you about Erich von Däniken, who died this year in 2026, and that was also in your latest newsletter.
Yeah, it was.
So,
You know, I was asked to ask about him, and I was told that his sole interest was, to keep things going and to keep people interested, and that's uh, that's what he did, and on to his next life.
exactly.
I'm sorry.
He also has an overlapping life.
Yes, he does have an overlapping life where he's able to actually see a lot of these things happening that he was writing about. You know, he got to enjoy the fruits, just not in that particular life, but this overlapping life. And we all have all these overlapping lives. My gosh, I've got several coming up, you know, that I haven't even lived yet, or I've lived, but I haven't lived. That's hard to explain.
Yeah, I get it. But it's always a full circle.
Yeah.
So don't worry, whatever you don't understand or you don't get to see in this body, you get to see in another for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, Tom, it's been a pleasure and a blessing connecting with you once more. Is there anything that you want to close up with? Tell the audience something specific.
Well, I encourage everybody to try meditation. Now, for beginners, I always recommend going to Amazon or wherever you buy books and everything, and you can enter Dick Sutphen, Sutphen, Spirit Guides. Now he's passed away, but he's got this audio called Spirit Guides, and it's great for beginners because he safely takes you down. He's hypnotized over 300,000 people in the past. He takes you down to a light meditative state. Then he says, okay, I'm going to leave you. You can ask your questions now. And then he comes back 5 minutes later or whatever, and he brings you back up. So this is great for a beginner if you want to start meditating, having your own questions. You can just sit at a computer. That's what I do. Every Saturday morning, I'm sitting at my computer with a long list of questions, and I just go down the list. Typically, I'm doing this for about 3 hours. I get pretty tired at the end, and I have to sleep late. But, you know, give it a try and, you know, ask to speak to Creator, and Creator will be there for you. Don't think, you know, I'm just this little old soul on earth. You know, Creator says in the future, every single person on earth is going to communicate with him because he can have trillions of conversations going on all at the same time, all over the universe.
Thank you very much for saying that, you know, and it's like if we could see ourselves the way that Creator looks at us, we would know that we are never small, but always incredibly brilliant and big.
We had to be the highest vibrational level of any soul on our planet in order to be able to take part in the Earth experiment. So keep that in mind. You came because you were the top of the line.
Because we knew we would whoop this. Thank you, Tom, for being here on Earth and for being part of the New Earth Awakening family.
Thank you for having me.